I think everyone who works in computing has learned long ago to be careful about making predictions, just because things change. Things change dramatically. Advances happen often faster than we expect, and we end up in situations that we don't expect. And I think that's one of the reasons why computing has had to be such a flexible field where the questions are constantly adapting and evolving. On the question of AI, I think there's a sense in which some of this is a profound change on the time scale of the last 2 years, and some of it is a profound change on the time scale of the last 12 to 14 years, right? So if we go back to 2010 to 2012, I think what we saw was all of a sudden, thanks to the sudden success of deep neural nets trained on enormous data sets, that certain questions that the field had really declared to be challenge problems beginning in the 1950s and 60s suddenly began to get solved in a way that really caught people by surprise, just with the rapidity with which the advances were happening, right? So these were questions like recognizing the objects in an image, turning the sound signal of human speech into written words, taking a paragraph of text and trying to summarize what it's about. These are questions that the field very much thought of as its core questions. Progress was very slow despite a huge amount of ingenuity in the research community. And suddenly the advances began to accelerate in the early 2010s, right? And so we had applications like face recognition and speech recognition and so forth. And I think that began this decade-long period when the advances began to come very quickly. And in some sense, one of the clear targets at that point was AI that didn't just discriminate data, that didn't just recognize data or classify, but that could generate, right? And that's where we got this term generative AI. And so I think the breakthroughs that you've seen over the past 2 to 3 years, in a sense, are the culmination of a decade of really accelerating advances through the success of deep neural nets. In some sense, I think those, the question about, where is this going to go? I think some of these changes are deep and they're going to be persistent, right? We now have tools that can automate certain tasks that we did not think would have been automated by this point. And these are tools that we're going to be interacting with over the coming years. I think what's much less clear is what we're going to build on top of them, right? Like I often think of this period in time as being disruptive in a way that the early days of the World Wide Web in, say, 1993 and 94 were similarly disruptive, right? And I remember, being in graduate school in 1994, looking at all the changes being brought about by the web. And there was a sense that so much had already happened by 1994, and that, of course, was correct. So much had happened. But I think the part we were missing was how much more was yet to happen, right? If we could have projected out over the next 10 years, almost nothing that we saw in 1994 was still visible at the surface in 2004. So much had been built on top of it that in some sense what was there in 1994 had become the infrastructure, had become the bedrock, and so much had happened since then, right? The growth of web search, social media, recommendation systems. I think if you think about the analogy to what's happening now, the bedrock is being built, this foundation is being built, right? Many researchers call these things foundation models with an eye toward that development. And I think what's very hard for us to anticipate is the number of different layers of abstraction that are likely to be developed on top of that. And that's really, I think, what the field is going to have to remain attuned to, both the opportunity to build those structures and then also the incredible requirement, really, that we do that responsibly and in the interest of society.